Hello, Connecticut people of good sense. This is Selena Rifkin. I'm here by myself today. We've uh, we've had a lot of people who are having issues at work, so you just got me. Today, I really want to talk about Ben Proto and how elections are run in Connecticut. You may or may not know that our illustrious leader of the Connecticut Republican Party, Mr. Ben Proto himself, has been nominated to the national stage by the Republican National Committee to run their budget. He is the chairman of the RNC Budget Committee now. And my question is, how the hell did that happen? But that's probably naive because there's no way that people on a national stage would have chosen someone with such a horrendous record without knowing exactly what they're getting. There's no way. There's just no way. I don't buy it. So that should tell you something about the Republican National Committee all by itself. Are Republicans entirely corrupt? No, they're not even entirely corrupt in Connecticut. And if you are on Facebook, I encourage you to go listen to today's post by the person running for the 5th district in Connecticut, Jonathan DeBarros. And he spends a lot of time spewing details, a lot of details about the history of how he got into politics and the people he talked to in the course of his journeys, one of which was Ben Proto. So you should hear it in his own words. And that's if you're on Facebook, you can just look him up, Jonathan DeBarros, DeBarros, and he's running for the 5th district. So if you haven't checked him out, you should. He's a real person. So Ben Proto. So he's been appointed to this position. That is going to give him power over some pretty large races. Whether or not the Republicans decide they're going to fund races by, people who are theoretically MAGA is very up in the air. So what's going to happen in the Republican Party is we're still going to need to keep pushing as Republicans if we want that party back. I fully believe in the two-party system. We need to have push and pull from both sides. And right now the Democrats are collapsing. We all know that. And it's tragic and it's sad that new parties have arisen. And if the Republicans decide that that they are more interested in the same control games that the Democrats do, just on a slightly, from a slightly different angle, then chances are they're going to go down too. And we MAGA folk will just have to all go and either found a party or I'm not a fan of Elon's plan that he had a few months ago of creating a whole new party because we're still going to have the same problems. The problem is us. The problem is that human beings are flawed and some people are going to rise to the top. And ideally, we don't want those people to be psychopaths. We want them to be good leaders. And we have some very good leaders in office right now. Lucky us. And there's luck or there's divine intervention, however you want to look at it. I can go both ways. I'm not particular. But, whatever works for you, we are blessed. That I'm definitely sure of. So this is no thanks to the Republican Party. And now that they've just put Ben Proto in a primary position, that becomes incredibly obvious. If there's anyone in the Trump administration listening to this, I'd really love to know how you guys snagged the Republican Party and used it like a skin suit, because that's kind of looking like what you did. And I think that was fabulous. Anyway, next thing. So back to Ben Proto. He's not good for the party, but this is a long-standing problem in Connecticut. The Connecticut Republican Party is not, there's a lot of gatekeeping. There are some good RTCs. The research that we've been doing, and those of you who have helped with that, we really, really appreciate the time you took to give us input. That really matters because now we're starting to get a better idea of which towns actually have functioning RTCs. And by functioning, I mean welcoming. Hi, how you doing? It's really great that you're here. Whether they do that with a letter or they shake your hand when you walk in. I have far more stories from people who say when they walk in, people go, "Why are you here?" In fact, when I called to find out about my RTC, I got nothing for months. When I called Mary Ann Turner, who is the secretary of the Connecticut GOP, she, or maybe she's the vice chair, don't quote me, but she's high up there, and y'all may know her name. When I called her to say I wanted to be involved, her question was, "Why?" How complicated is this? Isn't it incumbent upon people who are in the RTCs to invite people in to say, "Wow, great to have you here. How can we help you get acclimated?" But it generally doesn't work like that. More to the point, it's you walk in, you don't know what's going on because who of us, including myself, knows anything about Robert's Rules of Order? And either they're paying attention to Robert's Rules of Order, which is the way that civilized human beings manage to talk to each other when they don't agree on things. They follow these specific rules. That really helps keep things reasonable and sane and not completely boring for everybody else because you actually move from one thing to the next if you're doing it correctly. Or they're trading recipes for coleslaw. If you want to socialize, maybe have a separate event. That would be another suggestion. If it's a social club, maybe have that as a separate event because, we could use some Republican social clubs too. Just saying. So another thing that would be really helpful for the Republican Party in Connecticut would be, oh, maybe doing some actual advertising. But oh no, we can't do that because the Republican Party in Connecticut is literally broke. So the Republican National Committee hired someone as the chairman for their budget committee from a state that has a broke state party. Yeah. Okay. So at the same time, they also hired a new general counsel from Mississippi. Um, and I'd like to know something about him too, but I'm a little focused on Mr. Proto right now. So we have this major problem in the Connecticut GOP. There's also the issue of the people that they run and how they run their campaigns. Let's talk about George Logan for a minute. In theory, he came fairly close to winning in 2024. Let's see, I've got some stats here. He got 46% of the vote. Now, as Jonathan will have pointed out because he studied this, George Logan didn't go into the cities. And this is a major problem with Republican candidates. They're not going into the cities. And in the cities is where the majority of human beings live. This is why we have, this is why we have the Electoral College, so that the coasts don't run the country. I wish we had that for Connecticut. I wish every state had an Electoral College. Wouldn't that be awesome? Huh, maybe we could get that written into the Constitution at some point, the state constitution. That would be awesome. So George Logan got 46.6% of the vote in the 5th district. John Haynes got 53.4. Now, we're going to leave aside for a moment the voter fraud, which is definitely a thing. However, Mr. Logan didn't really campaign that well. He, I guess he raised some money, but he kind of dropped out of sight. towards the end of the campaign. What the heck happened with that? Was it on purpose? We can't know. Now let's talk about the guy for the fifth district. Here's another little tidbit that you need to know about what happens when someone goes to run for the Republican Party. And I first heard about this when I went to a meeting of, it was a Republican women's, not a Republican, conservative women's meeting. And I met a Mr. Rogers from the State Central Committee. And when I mentioned that I knew somebody who's running, he made a terrible face and said that you have to, if you want to run, if you want to run for Congress, you have to be able to raise $500,000. Okay. So my question is, why is money the first thing that's being asked? Jonathan DeBarros, when he went to run, Ben Proto told him the exact same thing. Hmm, maybe there's some correlation. Maybe there's some messaging going in there. Maybe. I don't know. How could I know? I'm just a little peon. So anyway, that was the same thing that Ben Proto said to Jonathan DeBarros. So my question is, why is how much money you can raise the first question if someone is going to run? Why is that the first question? Shouldn't the first question be, who do you know? Who could help you? What's your policies? What policies would you be advocating for? Might be more important than how much money you can raise, because the whole point is if you're running for governance, ideally, you're serving the people. You are representing the people that are in your district. What if the people in your district aren't particularly wealthy? What if every single one of them could afford to give you $10? If you talk to them and you find out what they want and you think, oh, here's a plan I could have to support these people and on a federal level or on a state level or whatever, what if you talk to people and find out what they think they need? Because they might actually know that better than you do. Yeah. If every one of the people in your district, let's see, let me go back to that number. I'm going to do a little math here while we're here. So, wrong frame. So, if Rosa DeLauro in the third district in the last election got 193,684 votes, or, what if every one of those people gave $10? That's a lot of freaking money. That's like over $1 million right there. That's $10 per person. Rosa DeLauro does not go talk to the people of New Haven. She certainly isn't. She's going to parties. She's not door knocking in New Haven or Hamden. And really, if you're going to win the third district, that's what you have to do. That's a reality. You can't win doing everything but New Haven and Hamden. The numbers just aren't there. So what happens when you have a candidate that's not actually campaigning? They're going to lose. That's how else do you say this? They're going to lose if they're not campaigning correctly. So when we look at our people who are running and whether or not they're actually running for real, ask them what their campaign strategy is. This is good to know. Where are the numbers in your district? This actually requires us to be even more informed as voters. I didn't think I was going to be digging this deep into this issue. I thought, I was like, oh, I'll go just be on my Republican town committee, and then I will be happy to go and write letters and do door knocking and support whoever is going to run. Silly me. I don't know what I was thinking. Oh well. So no, that's not what I found. I have done writing letters. I have not done any campaign door knocking because I haven't had a chance to do that, but I have written letters. I wrote letters for the special election. I did phone calls for the special election in Shelton earlier this year. And I actually wrote letters. I did postcards for some of the stuff that Scott Pressler's working on, the Wisconsin election. So, so I was like, I am doing what I can do, but in my district, nothing, nothing to see here. Move along. So I'm I'm personally frustrated, and I can see why Republicans in Connecticut swear mightily about the Connecticut GOP. Makes perfect sense. Okay. That being said, there are a couple of good senators. There's a couple of good representatives. And then there's some people who are sort of, they're just kind of floating around in there. Not quite rhinos. Maybe they look good. Maybe they're not good. So what I would say is one of the things I've noticed about conservatives is that loyalty is a really big issue. Loyalty is important, and you need to know what you can trust people for. And that's my point. I had a really nice chat with the folks who run the, oh God, I better get the name right here. Um, they're conservative. They're a lawyer couple, and I'll try and get their names right, but they're not in my head right now. And they work to for rights to life of various kinds. Part of that conversation included the gentleman telling me that in the course of opposing yeah, the right opposing right to die laws, that he was sitting next to a person in a wheelchair with blue hair and lots of piercings on their face. And that for this one thing, they were on the same side. And he's definitely a conservative. So, the one thing I would say to people who are like, if I can't trust you, get away, I want you to think about it's not do you trust people, it's what do you trust them for? That requires a little bit more interaction with them so that you know exactly where they stand on the issues that are important to you. This isn't easy. None of this is easy. We have to talk to people, and it's usually best done face to face. So, none of this is easy. And maybe because of Facebook and other social media, we have lost a little bit in the communication realm. But, when I was a kid, we didn't talk about politics or religion. When, when I was growing up, you didn't talk about that stuff at the table. We have to talk about it. We have to. We have to be able to talk about policies and not personalities. Why do you want something done? We're sort of biologically programmed to really appreciate leadership. And Donald Trump and his team have definitely shown leadership, and they stand up and it's like, wow, that's really awesome. But remember that we're not following the people. We're following what they are doing. It's their actions that matter. So we have to pay attention to policy. What is the policy? And is that policy constitutional? And yeah, it has been. So that's all awesome. So we're very blessed right now. But Donald Trump's not going to live forever. And even if everything goes according to plan and the Supreme Court absolutely wipes out the gerrymandering in the South, it's not going to affect Connecticut a whole lot because our gerrymandering isn't necessarily race related. I'm not sure what it's related to. Somebody could enlighten me maybe. But it's still gerrymandering and it's probably not race related. So it's not going to affect us. In Connecticut, we're still going to have this damn problem. We have this beautiful little state here. And if we don't stand up and do something, and I know that everybody out here is getting involved as much as they possibly can. And we all have our limits. I'm not bashing anybody, but you know, leadership. It's back to leadership. It's about policy and even the littlest things that you can do. So we're not talking about personality, even though it's been pretty fun to watch right now. I have seriously enjoyed some of the videos that I say. I'm not gonna kid you. I have been like laughing my butt off. Yeah. Um, so that's been fun. But, it kind of makes up for the last, I don't know, 15 years of torture. Am I exaggerating? It doesn't feel that way to me. So, yeah. Um, so what do you trust people for? Is there something that you can find common ground on in which you could pair up? Because we have to break up. It's like it's good to say, okay, we have a tent. How big is the Republican tent? That's the question. Is the Republican tent on the far end? Can the people who are completely anti-abortion put up with some people who are okay with abortion in the first trimester? Because it's a best, because maybe it's a best case scenario. Because once we start breaking it up, um, there's nobody has anything. Nobody has any power. So loyalty here is a very strong thing, and it's important. And once you start, and then we have to talk about religion. Now, Pastor Jake Dell, who is, we've had him on the show a couple of times, and I've really enjoyed him being there. He said it's okay to speak politics from the pulpit. I'm all for that because we've lost in this country, we've lost a lot of the internal guidance that comes from connection with the divine. And we need that back, and we need it back badly because I think that is one of the things that guards against things like media brainwashing. Because if you have a strong faith and you have all these people around you that are strong in their faith and they say X, Y, and Z is a really bad idea. When this person in the media says, "Oh, that's normal," you might take a minute and go, "That's not what my group of humans says is a good idea." Now, what the media has been telling us is like, let's use child sex mutilation as an example. The very few people who don't agree with that are have mental illness problems, or they're pedophiles, or they're making a whole lot of money doing quote unquote treatments on these children. So, that's really I'm going to go with that's like an, even though they say 80%, I'm going with at this point it's probably a 90% issue because all of a sudden the whole trans thing is trending down. That's good. That's good. I'm a naturally, I was, I'm in a community where there's lots of acceptance and it's not okay. It's not okay. So when you're talking politics, okay, that's a pretty big tent issue. There's a couple of other examples of big tent issues. I'm sure you can all think of them. So in the course of thinking about who do you want in your local Republican Party, how big is your tent? And who can you stand to put up with? From a religious standpoint, think about you have to be grounded in your religious principles in order to go out and deal with people who are not. Jesus sat down with tax collectors and ladies of the evening. He did that because he knew who he was. So, as religious people, that's what you have to do. You have to know who you are spiritually so that you don't have to be afraid of those other people. Because maybe you'll be able to convince them, but only if you sit down with them and talk to them and maybe even break bread with them. Find out what you have in common. So, that I think is my rant for today. And hopefully you found it interesting. And Was there anything else I wanted to add? Because sometimes I run out of brain cells. Nope, I think that'll do. We will hopefully be back next week with some fun announcements. And yeah, have a great evening and love you guys. God bless America and God bless Connecticut because we need it.